Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto found Crimson Sword and became greatest swordsman part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. When the War of the Four Beasts brings about the world's end. The goddess descends from the sky. Wings of light and dark spread afar. She guides us to bliss, her gift everlasting. Urahara Kazuki was a cautious man after all, being on the run from the Gote 13, and Seraiti will do that to a person. That being said, it wasn't that bad after all. His closest friend had left with him as had the Kido Corps commander, though that latter hadn't had a choice in the matter. His personality had also improved. He was no longer as shy as he was over 100 years ago when he first took up the mantle of the 12th squad captain of the Gote 13. He figured his relaxed nature was because of all the human interaction that he had been part of. Since he had been banished, though he did miss Seraiti occasionally. The people, not the paperwork, dear God, not the paperwork. Getting out of that was almost worth getting banished for. After all, paperwork was the one enemy even a captain could never hope to defeat. He just wished he'd gotten a chance to burn it all before he had been forced to flee so it could never harm another innocent soul again. Or better yet, somehow get it so that Aizen had to do it all. Sweet Kami, that would have been priceless. He was sure even the man who had single-handedly almost bought the Seraiti to its keens would have hated that with a passion. Let it never be said that Urahara Kazuki could not be petty at times, which brings us to his current predicament, the fact that the always happy and smiling Urahara Kazuki had a frown on his face. Something that was never seen outside of battle, unless paperwork was involved, the bane of his existence that it was. The problem was that Urahara Kazuki was dying, not that he was complaining. He had lived a long and happy life, the sealing of Aizen being the highlight. Even if he never discovered the secret to defeating paperwork, he knew it was out there somewhere. He just needed to find it so he could save generations from its evil curse. He had outlived all he had called friends: Aizen, Kurosaki, Ichigo, Karen, Yuzu, Yorichi, the Vizards, Tessai, Jinta, Ururu, Soi Fan. Hell, even old man Yamamoto kicked the bucket before him. Not that he was anywhere near Yamamoto's age. He was sure living that long would have driven him crazy. Though with everything that has happened to him, it was debatable if he was still sane. Then again, more than one person would have argued that he hadn't been sane to begin with. He wasn't prepared to bet against that either. The subject of his thoughts at this moment was one thing: his greatest creation, even if it took a monster to finish it, and his greatest mistake. The Hogyoku. In the 6 centuries since the battle, he still had not found a way to destroy it. Perhaps Aizen had said it best: reason exists for those who cannot go on living without clinging to it. Now let's go to the edge of reason. He was inside the realm of reason while the Hogyoku was outside of it, and just as a two-dimensional being could never interact with a being that exists in 3, perhaps that was the reason he could not destroy it, because he existed in a different sat to that of the Hogyoku. My only real option left is to seal the Hogyoku again, but he wasn't a fool. You could only hide something for so long before it was found. Even if he did find a place to seal it away until he was long dead, it would only delay the inevitable. Eventually it would resurface and bring pain to the world. Who knows, maybe another man who believed himself to be God would get his hands on it again. That was the last thing the world could ever need, another Aizen. The old Shinigami sighed. The other bitter truth that was slowly wearing away at him was that the Shinigami, as they were, are fast becoming a dying breed. Give or take another 1,000 years and none would be left by his estimate. Even though he had been banished and even though it was lifted, had no intention of going back to Seraiti, that was still a bitter pill to swallow. As there was no way a dying race could destroy the Hogyoku, but his other plan was to hide it somewhere and hope really hard no one finds it. Not exactly up to his usual brilliance. He sighed once again, looking at the picture on his mantle, a photo take just after Ichigo had regained his powers and they were all in full party mode. I'll be joining them soon enough, he muttered. He sighed again, thinking of his options. He had about 3 or 4 years worth of life left in him, not a lot by anyone's standards. The gears in his brain began to turn. There was one plan that could work, but it relied on so much dumb luck it was unthinkable. That being said, it wasn't like he had any better prospects. He sighed. Benihime was not going to like this, not even one bit. Time skipped 2 years later. Urahara smiled. The seal he had made was working slowly but surely. It had been siphoning off and storing replications of all he knew of Zanjutsu, Kido, Hoho and Hakuda. Today was the day it was finally ready. 6 months ago there had been a large disturbance of spiritual energy. Since then no Shinigami or hollows had been sighted around the world. Urahara had known from the second it had happened what was going on. The beings called kami, gods, were cleaning house. In all honesty though, the Soul King was the linchpin that the stability of the three dimensions. Seraiti, the human world, and Heko Mundo by regulating everything. Even he had people above him, and those people had decided enough was enough. Honestly, the beings called kami or gods could have ended the war between Shinigami, hollows and humans long ago. They chose not to do so, letting their creations fend for themselves. Not that that should be too surprising after all. Almost every holy scripture in the world said that man denied the bliss of ignorance for free will. In exchange for that, the gods or kami no longer interfered in the three world affairs, content to simply watch. It seemed that after seeing a mortal challenge them, that they could no longer just sit by and watch. Urahara sat and watched as the spiral in the center of the Kido array glowed red. He smiled as he pulled his longtime partner from his walking stick. Then spoke her name for the last time, Okiro Benihime. His sword changed. He could feel the sword's sadness as it mirrored his own. He smiled one last time before putting his hand on the array. Fuan, he shouted, causing the cave to tremble at the shout. The array glowed and moved as if alive, coursing up his Benihime. The array glowed a bloody red one more before being fully absorbed and disappeared, taking his Benihime with it. This was it, his last gamble, his last plan. The seal array was made to do two things and two things only. The first was to absorb a replica of all his skills in order to be taught to another. The other was to take his Benihime to another who could surpass reason and finally destroy his greatest mistake. He sighed as he felt life leave him. He supposed he shouldn't call her his anymore. After all, she would bond to another, becoming a new Benihime. Only she would have knowledge of his skills as instinctual as an Arrancar would know theirs. Urahara smiled as he died and turned to dust. His last thoughts were wondering if Yoruichi would be mad at him. The woman could hit when she wanted to. His last words were a curse to the bane of his existence, not the Hogyuku, not Hollow's hell. It was not even directed at Aizen. His last words cursed only one thing, the evil known only as paperwork. Time skipped 300 years later. The world could change a lot in 300 years, not that that should surprise anyone really. After all, humans thrive on two things. The first is change, the second is war. 300 years after the death of Urahara Kazuki, humanity finally did it. They destroyed themselves for the most part in atomic fire. From the ashes of the wastes new civilizations arose from the humans that had survived in the millions in great underground vaults. The radiation slowly changed them, giving them new abilities, but eventually, as is the nature of humans, this civilization also burned to the ground. So life went on. Thousands of years passed and the abilities of humanity's ancestors matured and got stronger as the broken world repaired itself. In time, people began to use the energy they called chakra, a power given by a man whom many worshipped as a god. The Sage of Six Paths, but even in his lifetime Benihime did not stir. 3,000 years after the death of Urahara Kazuki, the Yondaime Hokage stood atop the toad boss Gamabunta and stared down the Kyuubi, the ninth and greatest of the Biju. The toad boss was worried. Minato, the boss toad, grunted, looking up at the blonde that sat atop his head. "You're not going to be coming out of this alive, are you?" he questioned. The Yondaime merely smiled. "Nope, sorry Bunta. Looks like this will be the last we will be seeing of each other, huh?" The great toad merely shook his head before chuckling. He knew there was a reason he had liked this kid. The toad boss's mouth curled into a smile. "Well then," he yelled, bounding straight to the Biju, "let's give you one hell of a send-off then, kid." The Yondaime smiled, just like Bunta. If he couldn't live though the battle, then the old toad would send him off with a bang. See, as the opponent was the Kyuubi, it was going to be one hell of a send-off. As the distance closed, the Yondaime Hokage made his last hand seal. "Shiki Fuan," he yelled, the death god behind him dragging the Kyuubi body and soul into a small blonde child. He smiled one last time at the child he and Kushina would never be able to see grow up and wished him both health and happiness. The letter that he left Sarutobi should have his last wish that Naruto be seen as a hero fulfilled. After all, the people of the village hidden in the leaves were the kindest. He knew they would honor his last wish, he knew it. So the Yondaime died, his only regret the same as his wife, that he wouldn't get to see his son grow up, and a quick curse on all paperwork. In the void between world, Benihime stirred in her slumber and merged with the soul of the one who could surpass reason. Dwelling inside Naruto Uzumaki as he would be known until she was truly needed. Sarutobi Hiruzen, newly reinstated Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, was not having a good day. First the Kyuubi attacks, destroying his village, then they lose the greatest hero that Konoha has ever known, the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. He sighed. Before his heart clenched in grief, Bawako, his wife, had been killed by the Nine Tails in the attack. The Yondaime had, however, left his legacy behind, a small baby boy. He actually looked a lot like his father already, minus the whisker marks, of course. It was hard to believe that the small child was all that stood between Konoha and the Nine Tails. Sarutobi rubbed his eyes. He was too old for this. So sensei, this is Minato's legacy, huh? The deep voice sounded behind him. There was only one person that would call a small child that. Even if that small child was in the Hokage's office. Yes, Jiraiya. That's him. He pointed to the small crib in the corner of the room. The large white-haired man walked forward, his wooden geta clicking on the hardwood floor. The baby was sleeping peacefully, surprising considering that he was screaming his lungs out less than 2 hours ago. The large white-haired man just looked at the child. Naruto, huh? His face was an unreadable mask. It's not much, but it's all I can do for you right now. Take care of yourself, okay, kid? Jiraiya placed a toad wallet in the crib before turning back to the old fire shadow. After this we're going to have problems, you know that, right? He asked the Hokage. Sarutobi nodded. From Kumo first, probably. The third Raikage was always the most militaristic of the cages. He will probably send a few spies to test our defenses and get information. Iwa will be a close second. After all, they hated Minato and will most likely want confirmation of his death. Jiraiya nodded. He had come to the same conclusion. He looked back at the child again. Take good care of him, sensei, he asked, turning away to leave. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, just nodded as the last and the only still loyal member of his genin team left via the window. He would have asked Jiraiya to take care of the boy, but they would need his spy network in the years to come. He shuddered to think what could happen to the child. If Iwa heard Jiraiya of the Sannin was travailing with a blonde-haired child, the poor boy wouldn't have lasted a week. The Sandaime Hokage squared his shoulders before walking to his office. Would have to tell the council about Naruto being the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. They needed to know. He just hoped that the last wish of the Yondaime was followed. It was times like this that he wished that the hidden villages were military dictatorship, but unfortunately that was only true in wartime. He sighed. Now he was going to have to listen to greedy civilians argue about money, joy. He would almost rather be doing his paperwork, almost. Time skip 7 years after Kyuubi's attack. Naruto Uzumaki knew the back streets of Konoha like he knew the back of his hand, or Kakashi knew the plot of every Ika paradise. That was precisely the reason he knew he was in trouble. The day was October 10th, the day of the Kyuubi festival to celebrate the Yondaime Hokage's killing of the beast. Normally he would be hiding, not in his apartment. People broke into that place all the time, but he was still grateful to his Gigi for getting him an apartment. No, he normally hid on one of the less used ninja training grounds in the village. After all, no one likes getting called a monster or a demon on their birthday. But he could put up with that, but usually once a month a group of villagers would beat him and he would try to get away, keyword try. But it was always worse on his birthday. For some reason the group was always larger and far more violent than the other months. Even those people in the funny masks took longer to find him. His small feet pounded on the pavement of the back alleys as he got further away from the lights of the celebration. This normally would have been fine, except for the fact there was a large group of people following him. He could hear them yelling, "Come back here, monster! You killed my family," or the ever-classic "Die demon." When he was younger, if used to ask why this was happening to him, but that only made them angrier. So he did the only thing he could, ran faster. He dashed around the corner and his eyes went wide, the dead end of the alley staring him in the face. He saw a trash can nearby and dove into it, clutching his tiny hands over his mouth in a vain hope to stifle his breathing. Sinking lower on the trash can, he listened as the mob got closer and turned the corner. One of the dumber ones voiced the obvious question, "Where the hell did he go?" The alley was sparse, the only thing in it was trash and a trash can. The mont's lips curled evilly before nudging the person next to him. The man smiled and edged closer to the trash can. A figure dropped from the rooftop. The bare-masked Anbu faced the mob. "You are in violation of the Hokage's laws and shall all be punished appropriately," he said evenly. The man behind the mask smirked. "Or," he continued, "that's what I would be saying if my team was here right now." The mob just looked at him in confusion. The bare-masked Anbu operative pulled his sword out of its back sheath and pierced straight through the trash can. At the side of the alley, though the mob and the Anbu couldn't see it, the sword blade that came out of the trash can was covered in blood. Naruto Uzumaki was ecstatic. One of the people with funny masks was going to save him. He only caught the blur that followed the movement as the man turned around. Before he felt nothing but pain in his stomach. Naruto looked down. Cold steel was through his stomach. He could see his own blood pooling at the wound's opening. With a sound like water splattering over rock, the sword was removed. He knew that sound would haunt him. He did the only thing that he could. He screamed. XXX. Inside of Naruto, in a hidden place deep inside his subconscious, lay a perfect replica of Kohona. On a bed, a young woman with crimson hair had slept away the last few years since their joining. Eyes opened, perfectly crimson irises, the woman smiled. Her partner needed her. The Crimson Princess opened her mouth and began to sing. With both joy at finally meeting her partner and sorrow with what he had been through, the Crimson Princess that had slept through the ages had finally awoken. XXX. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandyame Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, had for once in his long life finished the bane of the cages. His paperwork early, but he couldn't seem to find it in him to rest. Not even the smutty goodness of Jiraiya's Ika was helping. The instincts inside him that had pulled him through countless battles, and 3 great ninja wars were on fire. Something was happening, something big, but just out of sight. You knew it was coming, just not what it was. So the aged fire shadow was sitting on top of his tower as the festival went on below. Chakra spiked, he could feel it and it made him sweat. It was Naruto's, of that he had no doubt, but it was also different. Naruto's was like sunshine, warm and comforting, something that the Hokage found strange given his life so far. This was similar, but at the same time, so different it was unnerving. The warm feeling like sunlight was still there, but it was laced with so many others. Some things he had never even felt before. It was warm yet cold, calm but raging, cool-headed and completely brutal. What worried him the most was the bloodlust it exuded. Like the only thing it came from was only at home on the battlefield. Yes, that power absolutely reeked of the smell of blood. The aging Hokage used Shunshin to reach the origin point of the power, hoping his surrogate grandson was okay. All he found was Naruto. The surrounding alley was covered in blood, what looked like the remains of humans. Or at least what you used to be able to call humans. It was hard to tell anymore, when there was no more than a finger in one piece. His surrogate grandson was unconscious. In his right hand was a katana covered in blood, red wrapping around the hilt and crimson tassels on the end of its hilt. His left held its sheath, black as night with blood-red metal tipping both ends. Sarutobi's mouth went dry. From what it looked like, his surrogate grandson had just killed upwards of 15 people. If his eyes did not deceive him, one of his own Anbu had been killed as well. The old fire shadow Shunshin to the hospital. He got the feeling that all the questions about Naruto would only increase as time went on. He also felt like there would be precious little answers. Naruto smiled as he ran through the forest on the outskirts of Konoha, the forbidden scroll attached firmly to his back. He felt like laughing and jumping for joy. Mizuki-sensei was awesome telling him about this makeup exam. So what if he couldn't do the stupid clone jutsu? If he could take from the Hokage and lean one jutsu from the scroll, he would pass. Though he did wonder if it was this easy, why they didn't just tell everyone who didn't pass that they could just do this. This is going to be great. I'm gonna be one step closer to Hokage after this, right partner? He looked down at the sword sheathed at his waist. He still remembered the day he'd gotten his partner. Flashback 5 years ago, Naruto, age 7. He groaned as he woke up. White wall, the smell of antiseptic. Yes, he was in the hospital. Kami, damn it, he muttered. He hated hospitals. The color scheme alone was depressing enough, but it was the eyes of the nurses and doctors that he couldn't stand. Most of them were so hate-filled or full of contempt. Unlike when he was outside, he couldn't just run away from them, he was stuck. Oh, you're awake, are you, Naruto? He turned over to see his surrogate grandfather sitting in the chair next to him, a katana cradled in his lap. He loved his surrogate grandfather like a real family and would always pay him full attention. Even if it didn't always look like it, that was why it was strange when he found himself fully focused on the katana on his grandfather's lap. It was, in a word, beautiful. The sheath was as black as midnight and held not a single blemish on it, not a scratch or chip or even slightly scuffed paint. The guard was perfectly rectangular with a design of flames etched into it. The hilt was covered in crimson wrapping, eventually ending in 2 crimson tassels that flowed freely from the end of the katana's hilt. It really was the most beautiful weapon he had ever seen, but more than that, he felt like he knew it. Like he had seen it before but couldn't place quite where, like a half-forgotten memory. His Gigi coughed to get his attention. I see you are admiring the katana, Naruto-kun. I agree that it truly is a beautiful weapon. The old fire shadow smiled. He really was glad that his surrogate grandson was okay, but he needed answers. That power that was not the Kyuubi and the sword that was in his grandson's hand. There were far too many questions that needed answering, though he did get the feeling that Naruto would not be able to answer much. Naruto, do you remember what happened tonight? Naruto seemed to shrink into himself. Some of it, Gigi, he admitted, his voice low. The Hokage's heart twisted. No child should have that look on his face. I was hiding on one of the training grounds when a whole bunch of people showed up. They seemed really angry for some reason, so I ran and then they followed. Eventually I reached a dead end and jumped into a trash can. They came into the alley but couldn't find me. Then one of those guys in funny masks jumped down and asked what they were doing. He seemed really angry for some reason. As he went on, Naruto's eyes got more and more desolate until what was formerly bright cerulean blue became as cold and inhospitable as a glacier. Though the Hokage couldn't help but feel a bit of pride in his Anbu. After all, the man jumped in to save his grandson. Then again, his Anbu Kuma, he thought, was also dead. Did that mean it was an outside attack to frame Naruto? Then, Naruto continued, he talked to the people for a little while before drawing his sword. The Hokage paid even greater attention. What had happened could well be uncovered in Naruto's next sentence. He put his sword right through the trash can I was hiding in. I remember feeling a pain in my stomach before passing out. That's all I remember, Gigi. Sorry if it wasn't very helpful. Sarutobi Hiruzen Sandame, Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, went from pride in his Anbu agent Kuma to disgust faster than an Akamichi goes through barbecue-flavored chips. That one of his Anbu could do that to a child sickened him. It almost made him wish that Kuma was still alive so that he could dish out a more appropriate punishment himself. They were both silent. To Naruto it seemed to stretch on forever until he finally worked up enough courage to ask a question that, from the first time he woke up, had been bothering him. Gigi, he started tentatively, have you shown me that katana before? It feels like I know it from somewhere. Sarutobi looked at him for a second. No, Naruto, he started slowly, I haven't seen this blade before tonight. It was in your hand when I found you. I was hoping you might be able to tell me more about it. Naruto just shook his head as Sarutobi tried not to sigh. He really had been hoping that he would be able to get more information than that, but if that was all, then he was right back where he started. Gigi, Naruto started looking very nervous, which was new to the old Hokage. Naruto never looked nervous. What is it, Naruto-kun? Sarutobi used his kindest voice. Though he did get the feeling that the request he would no doubt be given would both be very easy to fulfill and at the same time make his life at one point or another much more difficult. Naruto gathered his courage and continued, since you found that katana with me, would it be okay if I kept it, please? His eyes were hidden behind his hair and he looked vulnerable. Sarutobi thought for a moment. On one hand, this was the first time Naruto had cared about something enough to ask for it. Discounting ramen or necessitates, which likely meant that the boy felt something special with the sword, not impossible. But given what happened, he was apprehensive about giving the sword to Naruto. Admittedly, some of it was the fact that he knew nothing about the weapon, but there was also the fact that he could hurt himself. The old Hokage sighed, but Naruto never asked for anything. He smiled. It had a hint of deviousness behind it. Of course you can, Naruto-kun. Who knows, maybe it was left for you as a gift. That sentence was all it took as he saw his surrogate grandson's eyes light up with joy. Sarutobi handed the beautifully crafted katana over to Naruto, before laughing inside. Anbu, code name Inu aka Hokage Kakashi, was going to love his new mission. The young captain normally declined any missions that involved the blonde. Sarutobi was sure that part of it was because it hurt him seeing his sensei's son. Especially when the very thing that had killed him was sealed inside the boy. The other part, he was regretful to say, was probably resentment, though that was simple human nature. However, Inu was also an Anbu, a subordinate that answered directly to the Hokage, so if he ordered, Inu would have no choice in the matter. Like it or not, Hokage Kakashi was going to be getting acquainted with his sensei's living legacy one way or another. XXX. In Yuki no Kuni, an Anbu operative with a single Sharingan, I felt a chill go up his spine. The young princess on the back of the transport he had stolen felt him stiffen. Koyuki Kazuhana, the princess of Yuki no Kuni. Kakashi wondered why he felt like his life would be easier if the murdering psychopaths behind them caught up. XXX. Thanks, Gigi, Naruto yelled, jumping out of the hospital bed to hug the old man he saw as family. That's fine, Naruto-kun. Just remember that sword is your partner now. Take good care of it and it will take good care of you. Neither of them saw the sword vibrate in agreement. End flashback. Naruto landed at his assigned meeting place with Mizuki. He was still glad that the silver-haired Chunin was letting him take the makeup test. Honestly, he did not even like the man much, but considering that he was giving him another chance that not even Iruka had given him, he was thinking that he should probably change his opinion. Naruto sighed. It was 20 minutes past the deadline when Mizuki was supposed to meet him. He was starting to get antsy. Gah! He yelled, throwing his hands into the air. What the hell is taking him so long? Naruto sighed before looking back at the forbidden scroll and smiling, his whisker marks making him look like a fox. Well, since he's not here yet, maybe I should try learning a jutsu or two, just to make sure I pass. What do you think, partner? Sound like a good idea? He asked, looking down at his katana. He knew it was crazy, but there were times when he could swear that he heard a voice from his partner. Like a whisper on the wind or a half-remembered memory, it was there but you couldn't grasp it. He opened the old scroll. He mused. Kage Bunshin, no, I hate clones. Edo Tesse, hell no, it involves a human sacrifice. Alucard, what the hell is an Alucard? Kuchio's no jutsu, no, I don't have any animals. Gangbang no jutsu, what in Kami's name is Gangbang no jutsu? Next, Rasengan, what kind of moron calls a deadly attack spiraling sphere? Sweet Kami, is there nothing in this damn scroll worth learning? Naruto lamented to the sky, before he looked back to the scroll. Hello, what do we have here? Futon, Shinkaha. The user takes a deep breath and spins while exhaling, compressing the released air into a solitary blade of wind that covers a substantial area around the user, due to their circular motion. The resulting sharpened blast is large enough to slice through multiple targets located a significant distance from the user, causing grievous injuries to those hit. Naruto's eyes lit up. I think we have a winner, he smiled. XXX. Yumino Iruka was not what one would call an easily angered man, but between having to fail the boy he had come to see as a little brother in his genin exam, then receiving news from Mizuki that Naruto had stolen the forbidden scroll from the Hokage, he was almost at his boiling point. He gritted his teeth as he jumped through the forest of Konoha's northern outskirts looking for Naruto Uzumaki. He didn't know why Naruto would do something like this. Sure, the kid liked to play pranks, but he never once stole something. Though that hadn't stopped store owners claiming that he had in the past, even when Naruto hadn't been anywhere near them that day. Iruka was no sensor-type ninja, not by a long shot, but every ninja could feel chakra in others to a greater or lesser degree. It was easier if you spent a lot of time around the person in question, and Iruka had probably spent more time around Naruto than anyone else. With the possible exception of the Sandaime Hokage, Tsuki and Ayame Ichiraku. It was part of the reason he was so adept at catching Naruto after his pranks. Though some of the Anbu could do it as well, though the ones that actually could liked him and let him get away to take the others down a peg. After all, there was nothing like being shown up by a 12-year-old wearing neon orange to make someone learn the meaning of humility. That was why when he came across Naruto in a clearing in the center of the forest, he wasn't sure what to say. At least he assumed it used to be a clearing with all the gash and tear marks on the ground. He wasn't entirely sure. The earth had obviously been hit by some high-rank futon jutsu, the kind that was designed to decimate a large area. Naruto, Iruka yelled, his surprise quickly turning back into anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? He yelled. Stealing from the Hokage, especially that particular scroll, he gestured to the forbidden scroll quickly. Is treason, it's punishable by death. Normally he would be angry, but he was now halfway between angry and hysterical. He knew the council, particularly the civilian half, hated Naruto. They would push for the death sentence, and considering the scroll Naruto had stolen, they might very well get it. Naruto looked up at his older brother figure with a quizzical look on his face. But, Iruka-sensei, I was told this was the makeup exam, he stated, looking more than a little perplexed. Iruka stood rooted to the ground. He prayed he had just heard that wrong. What do you mean makeup exam, Naruto? There is no makeup exam like this. After all, a normal academy student shouldn't be able to break into the Hokage tower. Let alone steal something that is considered to be an S-rank classified document. Iruka stated slowly, making sure that the blonde heard and registered every word. From what Naruto had said, this was a setup. Now he just needed to know who and then get them the hell out of here. Before whoever orchestrated this turned up, because if they got here before they left, then this small, if torn up, clearing would become the site of a death match. Naruto was starting to look and feel nervous, but Mizuki-sensei told me that if I got the forbidden scroll from the Hokage tower, then I passed the genin exam. He said this was the makeup exam and I was being given a chance. Since he and you thought that it was unfair that I couldn't pass just because of not being able to perform the clone jutsu. And look, he said, smiling, I already learned a jutsu from the scroll futon, Shinkaha, he said proudly. Iruka's mind did a brief shutdown. Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last of his class. A 12-year-old incapable of doing even a simple bunshin no jutsu. Had learned an A-rank wind jutsu in under 3 hours. It boggled the mind. How was Naruto at the bottom of the class again? Then his brain caught up with the rest of what Naruto had said. Wait, Naruto, he asked, are you telling me that Mizuki asked you to do this? Please say no, please say no. His mind chanted this one phrase as he waited for the answer. To Iruka's dismay, Naruto nodded. Yep, he said, still looking confused. Mizuki-sensei told me that if I got the scroll, then I automatically passed the genin exam, so how did I do, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked, still looking confused, though a bit of hope and expectation was starting to mix into his expression. Now Iruka was worried this couldn't be good. Naruto, he started genitally, we have to leave now. Naruto gave him a questioning look. Something has happened. Iruka continued, There is no makeup exam that involves the stealing the forbidden scroll. I don't have a problem giving you one, but was as far as he got before the sound of metal cutting the air was heard. Iruka acted on instinct and pushed Naruto down. Naruto fell and looked up at Iruka, wondering why his teacher, Big Brother, had pushed him down. Before the sickening sound of metal cutting flesh was heard. It was a sound he would never forget, could never forget ever since that Anbu had put a sword through his gut. His teacher, Big Brother, his family was crouching over him. A large shuriken embedded in his back. Naruto felt fear course through him when Iruka's blood pooled around his leg. Nice job, Naruto, came the cheerful voice of Mizuki from above. The silver-haired traitor smiled at him, not like a normal smile. This one was filled with bloodlust and the promise of a painful death. Now there's just one last thing you can do for me. Naruto pushed himself out from under Iruka. He was hyperventilating and looked like he was about to die of fright. Mizuki pulled another oversized shuriken from his back. But before that, I want to tell you something I think you'll really enjoy knowing. The smile was beyond sadistic now. I'll tell you the reason everyone hates you so much. Naruto was rooted to the spot. He had asked his Gigi that countless times. The only answer he got was always, "They are ignorant. I hope you can forgive them one day, Naruto." "No, Mizuki," Iruka screamed. His face was a mask of pain and horror. After everything Naruto had happened to him, if he heard this now, it would probably break him. Mizuki just looked at him and started laughing. That Iruka wanted to protect a demon was the funnest thing he had ever heard. "Well, Naruto, you know how the Kyuubi attacked our village 12 years ago, right?" Mizuki's smile got even wider. If that were possible, he was going to drag this out. The little demonic bastard deserved it just like it deserved a slow death, and he was going to give it one. The truth is that the Yondaime couldn't kill it. That story is a lie. He could only seal it, and the person who he sealed it into was you. Mizuki's grin almost split his face. His arm holding the shuriken came back. "You are the Kyuubi no Yoko. Die, you fucking monster," he yelled, ecstasy seemingly penetrating his every word. His arm came forward and pitched the shuriken straight at Naruto at an area that he knew would kill on impact. This was it. Today he would take the forbidden scroll to Orochimaru-sama and kill the Kyuubi brat. In the process becoming a bigger hero than the Yondaime Hokage. A position he obviously deserved, and all would be right with the world. Naruto's vision contracted to the point of the whirling shuriken, and time seemed to slow down. "I'm going to die here," he asked himself. "With nothing worthwhile, this is where I'm going to die. How pathetic, how goddamn pathetic. If I'm going to die, then I at the very least need to take the person in front of me and drag them down to hell." Time seemed to fully stop for Naruto at that moment, the shuriken literally hanging in midair. "So," came the melodious voice from within his mind. "I've got a question for you, Naruto-kun," the voice asked, but there was an emotion inside of it he couldn't place. Something no one else had ever said to him sounded like that. Yes, the voice sounded protective of him. "Your enemy is by himself, and yet we are two, not one, so why do you fear him?" the voice asked. He couldn't answer, only ask one question. "Who are you?" The voice seemed to hesitate. "Why don't you know me?" It sounded sad. "How can you not know me?" it continued, "when I know you better than anyone else ever can? How can you not have heard my name by now? How long must I strain my voice before it will reach you?" "Naruto," the voice asked, now filled with strength, "do you want the power to stop that man in front of you?" it asked. "Do you need the power to protect yourself and others? Do you want to keep on living even though nothing but pain may await you at its end?" Naruto had been through a lot over the course of this day, but even then these questions had only one answer. "Yes," he said, smiling. His answer was quiet and small. "What? I can't hear you, Naruto-kun." The voice carried a tone of joy to it. "I said yes," came the answer. "Even if there is nothing for me at the end of this road, then I'll overcome it, because I already decided." That day when the Anbu put his sword through his stomach flashed before him. His resolve hardening. "I already decided that no matter what I will keep going, because unlike the others that believe that they have nothing to live for, The corpses of suicide victims in the red light district flashed through his mind. I refuse to die in a place like this, even if the world is nothing but a barren wasteland. I'll keep going because I want to see. He was yelling at the voice, I want to see what lies at its end even if I die there. Because I need to see what lies at the end of that wasteland, at the end of this endless battlefield. The voice hummed, sounding content. In that case, Naruto-kun, let me help you, but first you must listen and take my advice to heart. Abandon your fear. Look forward. Move forward and never stop. You'll age if you pull back. You'll die if you hesitate. Do you understand, Naruto? Now say it. Roar my name the heavens. Iruka saw Naruto's hand go to his katana as the shuriken closed in, his eyes opened in horror. His little brother, Naruto, was planning to match that shuriken head on. With nothing but his katana and his determination. Okiro Benihime, he heard the two words that were whispered as the katana was drawn. Okiro Benihime quite literally meant wake up, Crimson Princess. The attack that came with Naruto's slash was not something he was expecting. The red light roared across the clearing, leaving a deep smoking gouge in the earth. Cutting through the shuriken and Mizuki like hot knives through butter. The silver-haired traitor didn't even have time to scream before he died. Iruka looked on in amazement. The katana in his surrogate little brother's hands had changed. Instead of an ordinary if beautiful katana, the sword had become something else. The crimson wrapping on the hilt had changed to black, though it still retained its crimson tassels. The tsuba had changed to a U shape with a flame-like design around the base. A blood-red string had been tied around the base of the U-shaped guard, with 3 loops making up the knot. Finally, the blade itself had changed from an ordinary katana to a slightly longer sword around the size of an O-katana, a black blade with a silver edge. Iruka saw his little brother trying to stay standing before falling. The last words he heard before Naruto passed out on him were, "Never again, I will never back down again." Inside his mindscape, Benihime smiled. Naruto, I am your power, believe in me. I know you can't hear me properly, just yet, but let me say it anyway. Since if either of us wants to grow, we have to learn to understand each other. Benihime looked over Naruto's inner world from the top of the Hokage tower, giving her a full view of the sprawling ninja village. A view that's beauty was marred by the deep back rain clouds overhead. Naruto, I hate the rain. It rains in here, too, you know. When you are moody, it becomes cloudy. When you are sad, the rain falls so terribly easily. I can't stand it. Can you understand the horror of being rained on in this solitary world? Knowing that my partner is in pain, and until he comes to me I cannot help. In order to prevent that from happening, I'll lend you whatever power you need. If you can trust me, I won't let even one drop of rain fall from that sky. Trust me, you are not alone in any battle. Naruto. Time skip. Hours later, Naruto's mindscape. Naruto woke up feeling groggy before quickly looking around the room. Wherever he was, it was certainly not a hospital. Whoever this room belonged to liked the color red. That he could say for sure. The bed had red silk bed sheets. Silk, who the hell could afford something like that? Moreover, he could see several kimonos on the wall, all red with black markings. It was official as of this moment. Naruto Uzumaki had absolutely no idea where the hell he was. Benihime smiled. She could feel it. Her partner had just woken up. She gulped nervously and smoothed her kimono. She was merciless in battle, but she really had no idea how her partner would react to her, and it worried her. She glided down the halls. She could feel him moving around already. It seemed after waking up he had left. She smiled, nervous she might be, but she always did enjoy a good game of cat and mouse. It had been a good 15 minutes since Naruto had woken up, and he still couldn't figure out where the hell he was. The last things he remembered was calling out Benihime and killing Mizuki. Oh god, he'd killed someone. Maybe the villagers really were right. Maybe he was nothing but a demon. Could really be the Kyuubi. Nothing made sense at the moment. He stiffened as he felt a pair of arms go around him before relaxing. He didn't know why he relaxed, but he had felt this feeling before and he liked it. In Konoha it had been a constant uphill battle. Sure, he had Gigi and Iruka, but even if he had them, That just meant that he had some numbers on his side, nothing more than that. The feeling that was given off by this person was both warm and gentle. Unlike when he was in Konoha, this feeling was telling him on no uncertain terms that the battle was finally over. It was one whoever had him in this embrace would allow no more harm to come to him, the battle was won. Though he really didn't want to make this person let go, he had to see them. Turning around, he came face to face with one of the most beautiful people he had ever seen. Slightly older than him, 17 maybe 18, blood red hair and crimson iris and hourglass-shaped body, her chest looked like high C low D cup. Cherry red lips and wearing a red kimono with black flame designs on it. She looked like a goddess or maybe a princess. Naruto felt his mouth go dry. There was no doubt in his mind that this was the owner of the room from earlier and the one whose embrace he felt. "Who are you?" he asked in a quiet voice. The girl laughed, one with genuine affection in it, something Naruto had not heard many times before. "Ah, now I'm a little sad," the girl said. Her voice sounded like she was about to break out in song. "You've been calling me your partner for years. Now you learn my name only today and you've already forgotten it. I'm hurt, Naruto-kun." The girl mock pouted. "You haven't really forgotten me already, have you? Naruto-kun." Naruto's mouth went dry. There was only one thing he called partner. He cast his mind back to the battle with Mizuki. The voice that spoke to him called him. He opened his mouth before closing it again and looked up at her with trepidation in his eyes. "Could you be Benihime?" he asked quietly. The girl's face lit up in a smile before hugging him again. "Yeah, you remembered me, Naruto-kun. I'm so glad. I've been trying to tell you my name for years. I almost thought you'd forgotten it." She had a giant smile on her face, signifying her happiness at being with her partner and conversing for the first time. "But how can you be a person and a sword?" Naruto asked, looking confused. Benihime just kept smiling at him before leading him to the courtyard, and sitting under a tree he placed his head in Benihime's lap. "Well, that's actually easy to answer," she said brightly. She said proudly, "am a Zanpakuto too, a sword whose form and power are linked to my user's soul. The reason that we can talk now is that you were able to hear my name in the real world and give me access to bring you here." She finished brightly. Naruto couldn't help but feel special. She seemed so overjoyed to meet him. Naruto looked at her strangely. "I know you're not lying, but how do I know that?" The Crimson Princess smiled at him. "I'm part of your soul," she said simply. "You can't lie to your own soul no matter how much you may want to." Naruto nodded and relaxed more as Benihime started brushing her fingers through his hair. He couldn't tell how long they stayed like that. "So," Benihime asked cheerfully, "do you want to learn how to wield me?" Naruto nodded. She was his partner. He wouldn't dishonor her by being a sloppy or ineffectual wielder. Benihime's smile almost split her face. "Excellent," she said, clapping her hands. Before turning serious, "Listen well, Naruto," she started. "Learning to use me will be both long and hard, but you want to see it right. What lies at the end of that wasteland?" Naruto nodded. Benihime smiled again. "Okay, then I'll give you a quick rundown on what we'll be learning then, shall we?" Her voice sounded bright and happy. "To start with, we'll do Zanjutsu and Hakuta, then as you progress we will start on Kido and finally Ho-Ho, understand?" Naruto nodded but had to ask a question. "That's fine," he started, "but, Benihime, how do you know all these things to start with?" Benihime's face contorted for a second. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just do. Maybe it's something all Zanpakuto know instinctively," she offered but didn't sound convinced. "Would you like to start now?" Benihime asked politely. Naruto looked at her strangely, as he gathered his thoughts. As weird as everything was right now, there was one question that was bugging him. "Benihime," he started, trying to figure out how to phrase his question. "How will I improve if we can only train in the mindscape?" he asked. It seemed like a fair question to him. After all, he was inside his own mind. How would he improve his abilities here? Muscle memory was arguably the most important part of any form of hand-to-hand combat or kenjutsu. By repetitively doing something hundreds then thousands of times your body got used to the action until it became instinct. Naruto wasn't the smartest person in the world that he would readily admit to, he knew he was no Shikamaru. But he did listen at least when the teachers didn't throw him out of class. Benihime laughed. Tell me, Naruto-kun, how much do you know about muscle memory? Naruto thought about it for a second. Other than it came from years of repetition, not that much. Benihime smiled at the look on his face. Naruto-kun, what most people don't know is that muscle memory is actually a mental function. Not, as most assume, a physical one. You see, muscle memory in its basics is sending a particular signal to your nerves to move your body. In the mindscape you are doing this, but since you are asleep you twitch instead of moving. So even inside your mindscape you can train both your physical abilities and your Ryukyuu. Though I don't think you can train your chakra here, as it is a blend of both physical and spiritual energy and you just have spirit energy here. Benihime said, looking pleased with her explanation, though he was a bit dense through no fault of his own. He should have been able to understand that. Naruto nodded, but now he had another question, though he exited about the fact he could train in his mindscape. Benihime, what is Ryukyuu? He asked, never having heard the term before. The Crimson Princess smiled. Ryukyuu, Naruto-kun, is the correct name for the spiritual half of the energy known as chakra. Users of Zanpakuto use it in all forms of combat. To enhance their strength in hand-to-hand combat, to making it flow from their swords as a ranged attack though. Some ranged attacks were more versatile and powerful than others. Benihime smiled at him. Naruto-kun, remember that even though training here will give you more Ryukyuu, as well as the muscle memory necessary to perform both Zanjutsu and Hakuda. Never forget your training out in the physical world. All the strength you gain here will be worthless if you do not possess the physical capability to make use of it. Benihime finished sternly. Any more questions, Naruto-kun? She asked politely. Naruto shook his head. Benihime helped him get up. Then let's get started, Naruto-kun, she said brightly. Before walking to the center of the courtyard and throwing him a copy of herself in her sealed form. Naruto-kun, you used a lot of Ryukyuu when you killed Mizuki. Naruto nodded to her. For some reason killing someone didn't feel like such a big deal. Maybe because of Benihime's influence, maybe because of the fact so many people had tried to kill him. In the end he dismissed it. It no longer mattered as he turned his attention back to the red-haired beauty. You will probably be unconscious for about 3 days in the outside world. Benihime smiled at him, but that's a good thing. The time inside your mindscape passes differently than in the world outside. For every 8 hours that pass outside, 5 days will pass in here. Benihime smiled at him. That gives us a total of 45 days in here. Naruto nodded, looking slightly stunned, but could find nothing wrong with her math. Now then, Naruto-kun, Benihime said brightly, defend yourself, she yelled and charged at him, sword in hand. Time skip 3 days later, 45 from Naruto's perspective. Note 45 days is the equivalent of about 1.5 months. Closing parenthesis. Naruto woke up to an unfamiliar ceiling. The red bed sheets were missing as well. Where was? Oh right, his body must have woken back up. It did feel a little strange not to hear Benihime's voice when he woke though. The princess was always talking, singing or humming. It was safe to say she loved music in all its forms. Not that Naruto was complaining, after all she had a lovely voice. He took a deep breath in through his nose, the smell of antiseptic. Check. White bed sheets, check. Feeling of being watched by Anbu, double check. Oh joy, he was in hospital, again. He sighed and started counting backwards from 60. He had felt one of the Anbu leave after he woke up. If nothing else, his Jiji was a prompt man. Naruto factored in the Shunshin no Jutsu and past knowledge. The old man should be here in 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1. The door to his room slid open. The Hokage stood there and just looked at him before smiling. I am glad you're okay, Naruto-kun. The old man really did look revealed. I was just tired. Naruto shot back, seemingly unconcerned. but I want to know something, Gigi. The old Hokage nodded. Where is Benihime? Where is my partner? He had looked around the room when he woke up and couldn't see her anywhere and was starting to get worried. The Hokage just had an incredulous look on his face. He had been watching the battle, if you could call it that, through his crystal ball. He learns about the Kyuubi, he thought, and the first thing he wants to know is where this Benihime person is. The Hokage's thought processes stopped. He got reports on everyone. Naruto interacted with no one, ever mentioned someone called Benihime. Naruto, who is Benihime? The old fire shadow asked. I'm sure that you never mentioned anyone by that name to me before. Naruto's just looked at the Hokage for a moment before he burst out laughing. I forgot that you don't know her name yet, he said between breaths. He smiled at the Hokage, not his normal wide grin, just a small genuine smile. Something that the Hokage had seen very few times. He only saw that smile when Naruto talked about Ayame or Iruka, the two people who were closest to him, which confused him even more. If this Benihime was so special to Naruto, then surely he would have mentioned her to him. Though the name, Benihime, meant Crimson Princess and sounded a bit ominous to him. My partner, old man, Naruto said, still smiling at him. The old Hokage's heart almost stopped. The only thing Naruto ever referred to as his partner was his sword. He looked sternly at Naruto before sighing. Your katana is not here, Naruto. He dropped the normal affectionate suffix that he attached to the young blonde to let him know how serious he was. I was watching when you fought, Mizuki, you know. The aging fire shadow continued. I saw the attack that your katana produced. It wasn't normal. Your katana is being kept under lock and key until I can be sure it is safe. He saw the hurt in his surrogate grandson's eyes as he said that. Not that it surprised him. Naruto loved that katana more than anything after all. Naruto, I know you know about the Kyuubi. Until I can be sure that that blade is not connected to it, then I can't let you have it. I am sorry, Naruto-kun. The Hokage finished, looking back into Naruto's face, expecting it to look devastated. Instead he looked happy, something he had most definitely not expected to see. After all, the first and last person to try and take away Naruto's katana, Uchiha Sasuke, had been sent to hospital. The arm he had used to touch the sword required 34 stitches to fix. That had been a nightmare. The civilian and shinobi councils had both been calling for Naruto's execution that day. So then, old man, Naruto said, still smiling, if I can prove that Benihime is not connected to the Kyuubi, then there is no problem with me having her. He asked, making sure that he was absolutely clear on what he needed to do in order to get his partner back. The Hokage just looked dumbfounded and nodded, unable to believe that his surrogate grandson could speak of the demon sealed inside him so easily. Naruto smiled. That, Gigi, won't be a problem. The Hokage's mind started to work again. How do you intend to prove that your katana? Benihime, Naruto interrupted. Benihime, the Hokage amended, is not linked with the Kyuubi. The old Sarutobi took careful note of Naruto's reaction to the word Kyuubi. He didn't even flinch, surprising the Hokage. That's easy, Gigi, Naruto said, sounding completely confident. Sarutobi's eyebrow raised. You remember what the Kyuubi's chakra felt like, right? Sarutobi nodded again before shivering. He didn't think that anyone could forget the feeling of that chakra. Then bring me Benihime and I'll prove it to you. Sarutobi looked at Naruto for a second before reaching into his robe and pulling out a scroll. After seeing the destructive potential of the attack used on Mizuki, he had decided not to just put the katana in a vault, but instead keep it on him at all times in a storage scroll. It really was too dangerous to leave alone. Sarutobi wiped his blood on the scroll while channeling chakra into the seal. In a puff of smoke appeared Benihime in her sealed state. He also gave discreet hand signals to the Anbu in the room. If this was a trick by the Kyuubi, he would be ready for it. Naruto looked at Benihime's sealed form for a minute before drawing her from the sheath. He could feel her joy at being reunited. He smiled at the blade and spoke, Okiro Benihime, the beautiful katana in his hands. changed into a completely different form. Its energy, the Hokage couldn't call it chakra, felt completely different from the Kyuubi. The O-katana reformed to its normal appearance. The Hokage looked at him seriously. I think you have some explaining to do, Naruto-kun. Naruto just smiled at him. Time skip 3 hours and one very long and convoluted explanation later. And that's everything, Gigi. Naruto finished, now redressed in his jumpsuit. The Hokage had here a lot of ridiculous, over-the-top, difficult to believe things in his life. But this came very close to the top, but by the end he had accepted Naruto's story. Allowing his surrogate grandson to keep the katana no Benihime, he corrected himself. Now he felt tired, so very, very tired. Gigi, Naruto slowly, since I defeated a traitor and a chunin no less. Would that be enough for a field promotion to genin? Sarutobi just sat there for a second before he started laughing. You know what, Naruto, I think it is. In that moment Sarutobi didn't care that the civilian and shinobi councils were going to give him hell for his. The bright smile on Naruto's face was more than worth both the paperwork and the problems. He waved to the blonde one more time before walking out of the hospital. All in all, not a bad day, Benihime? He asked, his thoughts being transferred directly to her. As long as he want to talk to her and held her blade. Benihime just hummed in agreement. Time skip, God, I'm using these a lot. 1 week later, genin team assignments. Naruto was a little nervous as he walked towards the academy. His physical appearance was almost the same. He wasn't sporting overly large muscles or anything, not that he had expected to after only a week of physical training. But he felt completely different. Mentally he had matured at an astounding rate. Then again, he had been spending a lot of his time with Benihime. When he added it up, he'd spent a grand total of 80 days in his mindscape with the Crimson Princess, give or take a few for actual sleep, thanks to having someone that actually wanted to teach him and already knew what he was having trouble with. He grew fast mentally. It also helped that Benihime had made him promise to take his new job as a ninja more seriously. To aid in this, he had bought new clothes. They were darker, like a ninja should wear, not bright colors like his orange jumpsuit. A simple black full-length shirt with crimson flame designs on its sleeves, black pants and steel-toe boots. His look was completed by the white haori that he wore over the shirt with a strange diamond-like design on the back with the kanji for crimson inside it. He was, however, unable to completely part with the color orange and wore a sash around his waist in that color. Comfortably holding Benihime next to his left hip, his leaf headband, with red fabric of course, was tied to his left arm. He sighed and rubbed her hilt and felt reassurement rush through him. She thought he could do this, and so he would do this. He arrived outside the door to Iruka's class and walked in. He was the first one there, and so went and took a seat in the back row before slipping out a book from inside his haori. After seeing the old man take Benihime out of a sealing scroll, he had gotten interested in the art of fuinjutsu. He was currently reading up on it in his spare time. It really was a fascinating subject. Originally he had just wanted some storage scrolls. But now explosive tags, seals that could absorb an enemy's jutsu, dear God, with all the options that fuinjutsu provided, he didn't understand why more people didn't use it. He was told it was difficult, but he was taking to it like a fish to water and loving every second. Slowly but surely students began to trickle into the class, though he noted that Shikamaru was the only one who noticed him. If the slight widening of the Nara's eyes was any indication, he was surprised. Naruto just shrugged it off and went back to his book. After all, it wasn't often that he got enough free time to read it. Then he heard it. Not that it was surprising, after all, it happened almost every class. Unless one of them was sick, shouting was now being heard by the other genin as they watched the door to the class. With what could only be called apathy. Well, most of them looked on with apathy. Some of them took great enjoyment in the morning ritual. Yamanaka Ino and Haruno Sakura slammed open the door to the class all the time, yelling at each other to back off. Victory is mine, both yelled as they stepped into the room. Shut up, pig, my foot was in the door first, the pink-headed Sakura. Haruno snarled the other. Beat it, forehead, you and your billboard brow, shouldn't be near. Someone as wonderful as Sasuke-kun, I think a part of me just died writing that line, writes Sasuke-kun. The Yamanaka heiress said, fluttering her eyes at the Uchiha brooding in the seat near the window. Naruto sighed before placing his hand on his forehead and rubbing his temples. Why couldn't they just sit on either side of the brooding Uchiha and be done with it? Would make everyone's life so much easier. Well, except Sasuke's, but Naruto really didn't care about him. Not if it meant that this daily annoyance would never happen again. Normally he would be trying to ask Sakura on a date, but over the last weekend, with all the time that he spent in the mindscape with Benihime, he was slowly starting to lose his crush on the Pinkett. He had started listing her less desirable traits in an attempt not to see her as a perfect person. As a matter of fact, one of Naruto's earliest memories was of a woman with red hair, a round face, and bright blue eyes. Looking at him with nothing but love and adoration, he was sure that this was his first and only memory of his mother. One of the theories that he had come up with regarding why he had a crush on her was that her hair color was close to his mother's. Of course, that was all he had theories, still it was better than nothing. Naruto went back to his book. They were still arguing when Iruka walked into the room. "Sit down and shut up," Iruka yelled using his famed big head jutsu. The class quieted down quickly. "Now listen up. From this day onwards I am no longer your sensei. You are ninja, but you are still just genin. Remember, you are the lowest people on the chain of command, and if anyone above you gives you an order, you will follow it to the letter, no questions asked." Iruka was about to go on when he was interrupted by a boy with red markings on his cheeks and a puppy on his head. "So Iruka-sensei," he started with a drawl, "if we're the lowest people on the chain of command, then what about the dead last Naruto that didn't manage to pass? Does that mean since he's below us we can give him orders?" Kiba Inuzuka asked, sounding positively gleeful at the prospect of someone that had to do what he said. "No questions asked." Iruka shook his head at Kiba. "That would be true, Kiba." He started before he had a full-blown smirk on his face, "if Naruto failed, that is." Iruka finished, taking quite a bit of joy at the perplexed look on his former students' faces. "But Iruka-sensei," this time the voice came from Sakura, sitting on one side of Sasuke while Ino sat on the other. "Naruto Baka did fail, remember? He was so pathetic that he couldn't even do the clone technique." Sakura finished smiling. "After all, no matter how bad you were, it was always good to know there was someone worse." Actually, Sakura, Naruto ended up passing with flying colors. He smirked at the look of disbelief on Sakura's face. There was a mistake made by the person grading his test. So he did actually pass the written exam, and as for the clone jutsu, no, he cannot perform it. Sakura smiled, looking superior. "Instead, he demonstrated an A-rank wind jutsu to myself and the Hokage to pass the test, as well as some kenjutsu." Sakura's jaw dropped. "Iruka-sensei, you've got to be joking." Sakura scoffed. "There is no way that some dead last no-clan loser can do an A-rank jutsu. Not even Sasuke-kun can do that, so there is no way a dead last like Naruto could do one." She continued. Naruto was slightly annoyed, but the feelings he still had for his crush were preventing him from doing anything, so he just settled for watching. "I mean, come on, Iruka-sensei, he's just some on-clan loser. There's no way he could do an A-rank jutsu. After all, everyone knows that his parents ran away from the Kyuubi. How could?" That was as far as she got. Pressure dropped onto the class, sending Sakura and some of the weaker students to their knees. Naruto was pissed. He could take a lot of abuse, but bringing his parents into it crossed a line. He let his Ryukyuu flood the room, smothering the others with his pressure. It was one of the first things Benihime had taught him. How to intimidate someone with nothing but his Ryukyuu. After all, half the battle was mental. Make an opponent think he's beaten, he will defeat himself 9 times out of 10. Some of the people in the room were having problems breathing now, he noted before releasing his Ryukyuu. "You said something about my parents, Sakura?" he asked, his voice cold. For the first time since the class started, the people around him took notice of him. His new look raised some eyebrows. But it was the feeling he was giving off that startled people. Not his usual happy-go-lucky self. This Naruto felt both cold and ruthless. Iruka was the first to recover. Naruto, that's enough, he said sternly. Naruto looked at Sakura for another second. The pinkett flinched beneath his gaze, before returning to his seat. All right then, we will get right along to the team placements then. You will be working in teams of 3, so remember to watch each other's backs, okay? Time skip 3 hours later, the teams are the same as canon. The silence was deafening in the classroom where the newly made Team 7 were waiting. Naruto kept reading his book, Sasuke brooded, and Sakura was pacing up and down, stopping every now and then to rape Sasuke with her eyes. Where is he? Sakura screeched. Neither Sasuke nor Naruto paid her any attention. They were more than content just waiting it out, though Sasuke did look at Benihime every few minutes. But Naruto guessed the memory of stitches in his arm stopped him from trying to take her again. Gah! Where is he? Sakura screamed, causing both Naruto and Sasuke to grit their teeth in pain as the unholy scream of a banshee assaulted their ears. Naruto just sighed. This was ridiculous. He had almost finished his book on Fuinjutsu. The damn thing was over 500 pages long. He'd only be 40 in when they had started waiting. Hell, he was seriously considering using Jinzen to go into his mindscape and train with Benihime. Consequences be damned. Almost in response to Sakura's question, the door slid open. Standing there was a man with gravity-defying silver hair, in a standard Junin uniform with his forehead protector covering his left eye. The man said in lazy drawl, Team 7. My first impression is, I hate you, a lot. Feelings mutual, Cyclops. Naruto shot back. Kakashi just looked at him like he was bored. Meet me on the roof in 5 minutes. He waved lazily and disappeared in a shinsen, leaves dropping to the floor. XXX. Kakashi's heart hurt. It had been like seeing his sensei, Minato, all over again. Naruto was more or less a carbon copy of his father in terms of looks. Though if the reports he had read were right, he acted a lot more like his mother. Kakashi sighed. There was a reason he had asked for a team without Naruto on it. Kakashi knew mentally that Naruto, a victim of circumstance, he had heard enough about what happened to the kid in Anbu for that to be readily apparent. But by the same token, he had that thing that killed Minato and Kushina inside him. Kakashi, even after 12 years, still wasn't sure how to deal with that. He sighed again. He would just have to do his best and try not to neglect the kid. Kakashi snapped out of his thoughts as the door opened. Ma, you're just on time, he said, smiling at Sakura as she came through the door. Kakashi let his students get seated on the bench in front of him before speaking again. Okay, time to introduce yourselves. Say your name, then your likes, dislikes, hobbies and dreams. He finished, smiling. Sensei. Sakura started. Maybe you could go first to show us what you mean. Naruto looked at the pinkett like she had just grown a second head. Before adding ask stupid questions to the ever-growing list in his head. How did this girl pass as top kunoichi? Naruto asked himself. Benihime didn't answer him, as she, Kakashi and Sasuke were thinking the same thing. Okay then. Kakashi said, smiling. My name is Hokage Kakashi. I like some things and dislike others. My dreams are a bit personal, and as for hobbies, well, I have lots of hobbies. He finished, smiling again. All we learned was his name. Was the collective thought of all 3 genin of Team 7. You're up first, Pinky, Kakashi said, smiling at Sakura while she grumbled about his choice of nickname. Sakura quickly composed herself. My name is Haruno Sakura, my likes are. She turned to Sasuke and went bright red. My hobbies are, she let out a squeal while looking at Sasuke. And my dreams are. She looked at Sasuke with hearts in her eyes. You didn't tell us what you hate. Kakashi pointed out. He didn't like his first student all that much. Sure, she had potential, but at the rate she was going, Sakura would amount to little more than a glorified meat shield. Either for the more competent ninjas or just the more ruthless ones. That's easy. I hate Naruto baka. Sakura yelled. Naruto couldn't help but feel a small pain in his chest when she said that. He had hoped that she would at least see him a little differently with his new clothes. What else is new? He muttered bitterly. Kakashi winced as he heard Naruto. This was going to screw up the team dynamic a lot. You're up next, duck butt, he said cheerfully, pointing at a still brooding Sasuke. A small tick mark appeared over the self-proclaimed Uchiha Avenger's left eye, when Kakashi said that. He was an Uchiha. How dare some commoner disrespect him like that? It didn't matter if Kakashi was a Junin or not, the Uchiha were the elite of the elite. My name, he said, voice dripping with arrogance. As Uchiha Sasuke, he put emphasis on Uchiha. I don't like anything and I hate lots of things, particularly fangirls. Sakura flinched. If Sasuke noticed, then he didn't pay it any attention. I don't have a dream because I will make it a reality. I will kill a certain man and revive my clan. Kakashi held in a sigh. So far he had a fangirl and an Avenger. He just hoped that Naruto would be a little more normal. Both of his students so far could get the team killed on a mission with ease. Kakashi just hoped that whatever Naruto's quirk or malfunction was, it wouldn't put anyone in danger. Otherwise this team would be one big clusterfuck waiting to happen. Not that it wasn't already, Kakashi acknowledged, but if at least one of them, just one, didn't seem to have a self-destructive habit or goal, then it would improve the team's overall chances of survival. Okay then, Mr. Samurai Wannabe, you're up next. He smiled inwardly when he saw the tick mark over Naruto's eye. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. He took a deep breath. I like ramen and Benihime. I hate people who can't tell the difference between a scroll and the kunai that was sealed into it, as well as the 3 minutes that it takes for ramen to cook. My dream for the future is to become the best kenjutsu user I can be, and with any luck become a kenjutsu master. Naruto was being careful with his answer, as the old man had told him not to advertise that Benihime was sentient and held abilities beyond a normal katana. He wasn't lying to them, just leaving parts out. He didn't mention his other dream though. He still wanted to be Hokage, but at the moment he wanted to get the materialization training down, so he could show Benihime the real world, not just the mindscape. She did say she was in no hurry, but he wanted to show her so much. Naruto dedicated most of his time to training with that single-minded goal in mind. Kakashi winced when he heard the scroll and kunai remark. It looks like now that he knows about Kyuubi, he resents the villagers that treated him like a pariah. I just hope he isn't planning revenge on the village. After all, with everything that's been done to him, I could hardly blame him if he was. That brings up another question: just who is Benihime? Oh well, at least I have one that is at least semi-normal. That's something to be glad about. I wonder if Minato-sensei felt the same about our team when he got us. Well, that's good. You all have dreams and ambitions for the future. Hopefully your ninja training can help you achieve them. He cackled inwardly. He always did love the reaction from his next statement. Now meet me at Training Ground 7 at 5 am for your genin exam. Wait for it. 3, 2 and 1. What? Came the collective yell of his genin. Kakashi loved that reaction. But Kakashi-sensei, we already passed the genin exam. That's the reason that you're our sensei, remember? Sakura asked, sounding confused. Naruto on the other hand didn't like where this was going. Another test? Hell, he had gotten a field promotion to genin, bypassing the test completely. He gulped, his mouth suddenly dry. He really hoped that he could pass this one. Kakashi just smiled again. Ma, that is true, but that test is just to weed out the people who shouldn't be allowed to advance yet. When you leave the academy, another genin test is administered by the Junin sensei to see if you're ready to be genin. Oh, and the really interesting thing is that this test, the 3 genin would swear until their dying day that Kakashi's smile somehow reminded them of an evil grin, even though it looked exactly the same. This test has a fail rate of 66%. So out of the 27 people that passed, only 9 will actually become genin. Okay then, Yane, my cute little students, and some advice: don't eat breakfast, you'll throw up. Before disappearing in a shun-sun leaves dropping to the ground, Sakura immediately turned to Sasuke. Sasuke-kun, how about we go and make a plan so that we pass tomorrow's test? I'm sure with you there we could come up with some really great strategies, even with Naruto Baka getting in the way. Sakura had hearts in her eyes. If Sasuke said yes, then she would be one step closer to his heart, then true love would conquer all and she could rub it in Ino Pig's face. No, Sasuke said in an almost monotone. I don't your help or the Dobies to pass this test. You and him are worthless both of you are just going to slow me down. Stupid woman, you can't even see how weak you are, can you? He added before jumping on to the street below and walking off. Sakura looked dejected before turning around, her fist already raised. No, Naruto Baka, I will not go out with you. She yelled, before noticing that her other teammate had already left and neither Sasuke nor herself had even noticed. Naruto jumped onto another roof as he made a beeline for his apartment. It was about 1 p.m. now. That meant he had 16 hours before the, true, as it were, Genin exam. He smirked. By entering the mindscape with Jinzen he could take those 16 hours, turning them into 10 days worth of training with Benihime. Well, to be Hones more like 10 days of training, talking and just general enjoyment of each other's company. Still, he could get more training in than either Sasuke and Sakura could. Naruto smiled as he angled for the red light district. Tomorrow was going to be good, very, very good. The blonde genin idly noted as he got closer to his apartment that it really could use a new coat of paint and some putty for the cracks. Some new pipes for the water and, actually, you know what, just rip the whole thing down and start from scratch. The place was a fucking dump anyway. He sighed as he looked at his front door. His apartment, at least the outside, had been vandalized, again. The words, Die Demon, emblazoned with large letters on his front door. Naruto sighed, ignorant bastards, couldn't they tell the difference between him and a gigantic demon fox, morons. He rubbed his forehead as he debated on whether or not to go through the trouble of getting the paint off. Opinions, Benihime? He asked inwardly. Nah, don't bother, Naruto-kun. The Crimson Princess said happily. Today you officially became a genin, no matter what that Cyclops says. Work like that can wait till tomorrow. Now hurry up and get in here, I'm getting lonely. Naruto chuckled as he heard the parting remark from his partner. Heading inside, no longer paying attention to the graffiti on his front door. Sitting down on his couch and laying Benihime on his lap and closing his eyes to meditate. Time skip 5 training ground 7. Naruto yawned. He'd spent the last 16 hours inside his mindscape. While it was somewhat similar to sleep, it was still not as restful. Benihime made him promise to get a proper sleep tonight instead of going inside the mindscape. Originally he had declined, wanting to spend more time with the Crimson Princess and learn new skills, but after seeing the pleading look on her face he had capitulated and agreed to getting a good night's rest after the, true, as it were, genin exam today, if Kakashi ever turned up, that was. Naruto yawned again. It looked like he was the first one here. The blonde quickly took a look at the surroundings. Nothing special, just a few stumps in the ground and some forested surroundings. He sighed before jumping into a tree and settling in to wait for Kakashi. He refused to call him sensei until he actually taught him something, taking out his beginner book 2 on Fuinjutsu. Thanks to Kakashi he had finished book 1 yesterday. So Naruto had to take another sizable chunk out of his already diminishing savings account to buy the new Fuinjutsu book. He was sure that anyone else would have got it at a reasonable price, but thanks to being Konoha's demon brat, everything's price was more or less tripped for him. Ignorant bastards, Naruto muttered, making a mental note to talk to the Hokage about where to find scrolls on ninja techniques. Sure, he could pass off Hakuda as his own personal fighting style. The Zanjutsu could be done the same way, but his Kido spells were going to be a little hard to hide. He needed some jutsus before people started to ask too many uncomfortable questions. Naruto sighed. The old Hokage had also told him not to use his Shikai where people could see if it could be avoided, as it would raise too many questions, and quite likely get Sasuke to go to the council, to have them take Benihime from him. It wouldn't work, of course. After all, Benihime would probably draw the arrogant bastard into the mindscape, then proceed to beat the holy hell out of the arrogant Uchiha, but he wanted to save both her and the old man the trouble. That was part of the reason he had been studying Zanjutsu so hard, so he could use the more advanced sword techniques, so that he wouldn't simply rely on the raw power his Shikai brought to the table. Naruto pushed these thoughts to the back of his head and started to read his new more than mildly expensive book. The Art of Fuinjutsu. He read. As both vast and complicated, many people do not have the drive to accomplish themselves in such a difficult and obscure art. But with the vast array of options that Fuinjutsu brings to the user, it makes them both a surprising and versatile combatant. Allowing one to easily surprise their opponent, then overwhelm or outsmart them by use of seals, because the art of Fuinjutsu is not well known. Many opponents don't know what each seal does, allowing a Fuinjutsu user to keep their opponents off guard. "Good morning, Sasuke-kun," came the high-pitched screeching voice of his teammate, Haruno Sakura, though Naruto used the term teammate loosely. He already knew both her and Sasuke didn't view him as a teammate, just as a burden. They didn't respect him, and how could you trust someone or call them a teammate if they did not respect you or your judgment? "Speaking of the Uchiha, where is the brooding little emo?" Naruto muttered. Giving the clearing a quick once-over, spotting the king of the brooders, leaning against one of the poles in the middle of the training ground, his back facing towards Naruto. The spiky-haired blonde sighed as Sakura asked Sasuke if he wanted to go on a date. Even if he was just barely starting to get over his crush on the pinkett, it still hurt to see her ask someone else out. He turned back to his book and tried with varying degrees of success to tune Sakura and Sasuke out. Benihime started singing, giving him something pleasant to focus on and tuning out both of them completely. Naruto was finally pulled out of his own little world by the arrival of Kakashi, well, not by Kakashi himself per se, but the high-pitched scream of "liar" from Sakura. "Well, let's take this test then," Sasuke said in his almost monotone voice. Ma, how do you expect to take the Genin exam with only 2 people, when it's a 3-person test?" Kakashi asked, partially to test them. After all, he could feel Naruto's chakra in a tree directly behind Sasuke. The other part was to find out what his other 2 students really thought about his third. Sasuke's was a simple snort of disdain, dismissing the idea that he and Uchiha of all people needed someone's help. Let alone that of a failure like Naruto to pass a stupid exam. Sakura, however, had a far more vocal response, one that made Kakashi wince. "Who needs that baka?" she started. "He's just a dead last and a loser without a clan or anything. I bet he tricked the Hokage into thinking he knew an A-rank jutsu, just so he could pass. He's pathetic. My mother always told me that his parents ran away when the Kyuubi attacked. They were pathetic. Why should their son be any different?" She finished sounding smug. She might not be from a shinobi clan, but the Harunos were respected merchants and traders. She had a clan and he didn't. That alone made her better than him. Kakashi was hoping he had just heard Sakura wrong, that her parents didn't tell her things like that. But he wasn't an idiot with the third's law about not telling anyone who didn't already know about the Kyuubi. The story of how Naruto's parents ran away was probably how her family decided to handle instilling hatred of Naruto into Sakura. This was really going to screw with team dynamics. Kakashi was bought out of his thoughts by the approaching presence behind Sasuke. He looked up and felt his mouth go dry. Kakashi had been hoping that maybe, just maybe, Naruto hadn't heard what Sakura had just said. That hope was quickly crushed when he saw the look in Naruto's eyes. He had expected anger, hurt, hatred even. What was inside his eyes seemed even worse, that blank emotionless look. Kakashi had been Itachi's Anbu captain. Right now Naruto's eyes made Itachi's normally emotionless expression look positively joy-filled. His eyes, Kakashi had seen his sensei Minato in every different mood imaginable. But never even once had he thought the blue cerulean that Naruto had inherited from his father could look like this. Cold, harsh, inhospitable were all good words to describe Naruto's eyes in that moment. But it was the feeling that the boy gave off that put Kakashi on edge, cold, calm, composed and completely devoid of mercy. "I'm right here, Kakashi," Naruto stated, voice even, After that speech of Sakura's, Benihime was screaming for her blood and Naruto was sorely tempted to oblige her. Sakura and Sasuke turned around so quickly, you would have thought they had turned their necks a full 180 degrees and just left their bodies facing forward. The looks on their faces would normally make Naruto laugh, right now though he wanted to kill them. Naruto baka. Sakura screamed at him. Why are you so late? You almost made Sasuke-kun and I fail, you worthless baka. She pulled her hand back to punch him thinking he would take it like so many times before. She was in for a rude awakening. The fist went forward. Naruto waited, 5 inches, 4, 3. Time to dodge. He leaned forward allowing the poorly thrown punch to go above his head, pulling himself opposite to Sakura's ribs. Channeling Ryukyuku into his palm, Naruto placed it on Sakura's side and pivoted releasing the stored energy, sending her flying. Kakashi watched in horror as one member of his team mercilessly attacked another. He saw the blood come out of Sakura's mouth as the attack hit. Naruto straightened back up like nothing happened. The attack he used Tesho was one of the most basic Hakuda strikes. Normally he would never consider using Hakuda on a comrade no matter how much he disliked them. Sasuke was living proof. But Sakura had crossed a line. She wasn't a comrade anymore. He wouldn't kill her but he wouldn't save her either. Naruto. Kakashi started, sounding unusually stern. Attacking a fellow Konoha ninja is treason, you know this. Kakashi was about to continue when Naruto said a few words he had hoped never to hear. Yes. Naruto agreed. Attacking a comrade and fellow ninja would be treason. But after what she just said, he flicked his thumb back towards Sakura who was still trying to pull herself off the ground. I don't see her as either. She's just a stepping stone, a worthless human that deserves neither mercy nor pity. Naruto turned his frozen eyes on Kakashi. Before muttering in a tone only Kakashi could hear. Just like the rest of this worthless village. Kakashi honestly debated letting them take the genin test after that, but if he didn't then the council would be on his back about the last Uchiha. He couldn't just let Obito's legacy fall to the side like that. A small voice in his head asked about Minato's legacy and what Kakashi had done for him. Kakashi just tried to drown it out, with very limited success. Okay, after that display I would normally fail you all on principle. But Sakura's comments were out of line, so I'm going to let this slide this time only. However, that is only if Naruto tells me what kind of taijutsu style he just used. Kakashi finished. According to the reports that he had been given, Naruto was little better than a tavern brawler. That was what concerned him. The strike Naruto had used was clearly part of a style, and for him to pick it up so quickly it would have to be an effective one. Naruto thought about it for a second. He didn't see the harm in telling Kakashi, but if he asked where he learned it that might cause him some problems. I guess I could just redirect him to the old man. If he didn't tell Kakashi about Benihime in advance, then he probably won't if he goes and asks about it. Opinions. Benihime. The Crimson Princess was silent for a moment. I think you should tell him the name of the fighting style, after all there won't be any records of it. Then just like you said, if he asks more redirect him to the Hokage. I think that the old man will keep our little secret, at least until we want others to know. Naruto mentally nodded in agreement before looking back at Kakashi. The style's name is Hakuda. Naruto said, some emotion creeping back into his tone. Kakashi mentally reviewed the types of taijutsu he knew. He was certain that he had never heard of the name Hakuda. He was sure he would have if a village Junin knew it. After all, he had spared all of them at one time or another. And who taught you this style, Naruto? Kakashi asked as casually as possible, fishing for more information. Benihime, Naruto replied. His face showed little emotion. Inside, however, both he and Benihime were laughing hysterically. The Cyclops would be running in circles until they decided to bring him into the loop, and that wouldn't happen for a long time if they had their way. Knowing that the old man would likely back them up, they would probably be getting it. Kakashi ran through the lists of Junin in his mind, both Anbu and non-Anbu. Not even one of them had the name Benihime. Even as a nickname he supposed Anko could qualify, but Anko never used that kind of fighting style. Kakashi knew for a fact that Anko used the hubby Ken lit. Snake Fist. He resolved to ask the Hokage about it later. Okay then, Kakashi said, still sounding lazy, as he tied a pair of bells to his flak jacket. Your objective is to get these 2 bells from me before noon. He smiled and pulled out an clock and set the alarm. You have 4 hours, any questions? Naruto felt perplexed. Wait, you had a clock on you and you were still 3 hours late. How the hell does that even happen? Naruto asked, legitimately confused by that fact, and rightly so. In what could well be a world first, even Sasuke nodded in agreement with the blonde. I have a better question. Came the winded voice of Sakura from behind them. Why are there only 2 bells, Kakashi-sensei? She shot a death glare at Naruto. More importantly, why did you hit me, Naruto Baka? I'm from a clan you are not allowed to hit me. Kakashi opened his mouth to reply but was cut off. Why did I hit you? Naruto asked, sounding genuinely surprised by Sakura's question. You tried to hit me and I retaliated. What's so surprising about that? Sakura went to yell at him but was stopped by Naruto's next words. In fact, I don't think I quite heard you properly when you said those things about my parents. His hand dropped to Benihime's hilt and Sakura paled when she saw his hand, casually resting in sword drawing position before taking a shaky step back. Maybe. Naruto continued, his voice getting progressively colder. You would like to repeat them for me? Sakura did the smart thing and backed down. Kakashi let the tension out of his body. At least he wouldn't have to keep one of his students from killing the other, well, today at least. Well, Sakura, he said in a cheerful voice. That's because only 2 of you will pass, the other one will go back to the academy. On top of that, the one that goes back will be tied to the stump and have to watch the other 2 eat lunch in front of them. He smiled at the group. No more questions, in that case ready and go. Kakashi took note of his student hiding places, Sakura 75 meters to his left hidden in some bushes. Sasuke, 110.5 meters directly behind him, and Naruto standing directly in front of him, just like when they were talking earlier. Naruto, he said, sounding confused. You do know the test has started, right? You can go and hide now. Naruto just shrugged in response. Yes, I know, Kakashi, he acknowledged, drawing Benihime. Kakashi was immediately on guard. All of his instincts were telling him to be wary of that sword. But you probably know this training ground like the back of your hand. No point in wasting time and energy hiding if you'll immediately know where I am. Naruto flicked Benihime's tip at the cycloptic Junin, despite the distance between them. Kakashi immediately dodged and felt a sharp pain in his right cheek. He touched his face, blood was running down his mask. Kakashi's thought processes stopped. A fucking genin had just injured him. Not using any chakra at all, that slash that managed to cause him a light injury was executed using nothing but pure skill. Kakashi stared at Naruto. This kid's a monster. That was when he realized that Naruto was wearing that sword for more than just show. Naruto grimaced. The Zanjutsu technique he had just used was the hosuri. The most basic of the lot and the only one he had at his disposal. Sure, he knew how to block, parry, step and attack, but Zanjutsu was so much more than that. It was about letting your Ryukyuku flow through the blade to produce an attack that defied everything. What was irritating him, though, was the fact he missed. He could see Kakashi only had one eye. Naruto had been hoping to cut him on the eyebrow and throw off his depth perception. Benihime had done it enough times to him to show that it was brutally effective. Naruto sighed. He doubted that Kakashi would give him time to use hosuri again. After all, it took him 5 seconds to set it up. That meant he was going to have to go to close combat. God damn it. He charged, cutting diagonally down. Before changing his grip and smashing his palm into Kakashi's side, Tesho, Naruto screamed before smiling. Kakashi had underestimated him. This was over. His enjoyment was short-lived as Kakashi turned into a log. Though he did note with a small bit of pride that the Tesho that he used smashed the log to splinters. Damn it, Naruto cursed inwardly, pivoting to avoid a punch to the kidney from Kakashi. Kakashi's eye opened wider. Damn, the kid was fast. Naruto jumped back to avoid the spin kick aimed at his head, pointing his index finger at Kakashi, making the Jonin wonder what he was doing. Naruto smiled. He just knew he was going to love the reaction he was about to get. Hado number 4. Byakurai, lighting lanced off his outstretched finger towards Kakashi's head. The white-haired Junin dodged rather easily but was still shaken. This kid was supposed to be the dead freaking last. So far he cuts him from a distance using only pure skill. Is able to force him to use the Kawarimi and then destroy the log he substituted with. Following that, he uses some kind of jutsu that Kakashi had never seen before. The kid was one surprise after another. Naruto loved the bug-eyed look in Kakashi's lone eye and decided to up the ante, letting the Jonin see the highest level Kido he could cast. He knew Kakashi would dodge it, but it would definitely annihilate some trees, make Sasuke jealous as all hell as well. A definite plus in the blonde Genin's book, he smirked. Kakashi saw Naruto put his palm up towards him. He gulped. What was his most unpredictable student about to do now? Ye Lord, mask of flesh and bone, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. Truth and temperance, upon this sinless wall of dreams unleash but slightly the wrath of your claws. Hado number 33, Sokatsui. Blue fire roared from his hand and annihilated everything in front of him, including 4 trees. Naruto knew Kakashi had gotten away, though. The man would have been a piss poor Jonin if he didn't escape when Naruto used that long incantation. Kakashi had never been so glad for the Kawarimi. He was more than interested in Naruto now, but he still had other students that he needed to test. Though he was contemplating using his Sharingan in order to copy some of Naruto's jutsu. One way or the other, though, Kakashi would be getting some answers either out of the Hokage or Naruto. Sakura was just staring at the training ground, looking at what Naruto had just done. Her mind had shut down and was not responding. At first everything seemed to be going about as well as could be expected. Both Sasuke and she had hidden. Naruto opted to stay in the open and just talk with their sensei before drawing his sword. From this point onward, Sakura could no longer make sense of the encounter. Naruto had injured their sensei with no support, then proceeded to devastate their surroundings, using jutsu that she had never seen or heard of before. Sakura just couldn't understand it. Strange, isn't it, Sakura? Came the slightly bored voice from behind her. Sakura opened her mouth to agree before turning around, coming face to face with an eye-smiling Kakashi. Just as he finished his hand seals, Megan, Narakumi no Jutsu. Leaves fell around Sakura as she tried to figure out where her sensei went. Sakura over here. Sakura turned towards the tired-sounding voice and screamed. Staggering forward was her crush Uchiha Sasuke. The young Uchiha had several weapons embedded in his body as blood pooled around him, giving the scene an ethereal feel. As Sakura struggled to figure out what was going on, looking at her crush, the fangirl did the one thing she could: screamed and fainted. The illusion parted, leaving a disappointed Kakashi. This was supposed to be the best genjutsu user on the team. There were times when he could swear that the Hokage hated him. At the same time, Sasuke was seething at the battle between the supposed Dobi and his Jonin sensei. It was maddening. Why did someone like the Dobi have that kind of power, when he and Uchiha didn't? Why? Naruto was nothing, just a clan-less loser. Everyone hated him and loved Sasuke. So how could that worthless Dobi have power he didn't? He needed that power, he deserved it to kill Itachi, he deserved everything that the leaf had and more if necessary. The village knew it. They gave him extra training in jutsu. Sasuke decided he would go to the council after this, and demand that they give him access to all of the techniques that Naruto knew. Unlike the Dobi, he would be able to use them correctly. After all, the Uchiha were the elite of the elite, but before that, came avenging the stain on his honor. On the honor of the Uchiha, how dare the Dobi injure their sensei before he did? Kakashi approached Sasuke's hiding place carefully. Since Naruto had exceeded his expectations so drastically, Kakashi had been on guard. Not even taking out his beloved Ika to read, the bushes next to him rustled and the Jonin used the warning to jump into a nearby tree. just before the barrage of shuriken hit where he had been standing a second ago. Kakashi raised his right arm and blocked Sasuke's flying kick, smiling at his third genin. Not bad, Sasuke. Kakashi admitted. You're certainly different from Naruto and Sakura. But being different is not always a good thing. You're good, Sasuke, but you're not the best genin here. That title goes to Naruto. Kakashi smiled at his last student. Sasuke was beyond angry. The Jonin dodges his trap and kicks so easily, then tells him he's not as good as some no-clan loser. You're right, I'm not on the Dobi's level, I'm above him. He yelled, hands blurring through hand seals. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. Kakashi smirked beneath his mask. This really would have caught him off guard, if he hadn't seen Naruto quite literally incinerate 4 trees earlier. Sasuke looked at the path his fireball had taken. He couldn't smell burning flesh, so his sensei didn't get hit. He wasn't to the right or left, above. Sasuke yelled, looking straight up and seeing nothing. Below, actually, came the cheerful voice of Kakashi. Doden. Moguragakur no Jutsu. A pair of hands came out of the ground and gripped his ankles. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Sasuke was unceremoniously burrowed up to his neck in the earth as Kakashi pulled himself out of a hole opposite. Not bad, Sasuke, but you could do better. Yane. Kakashi gave him a cheery wave before disappearing via Shunshin. Sasuke was livid. How dare such a commoner do this to him? He would show Kakashi the true power of the Uchiha. He looked around to see if anything was close by, just as soon as he dug himself out. Kakashi returned to the 3 stumps and was surprised to see Naruto waiting there. Kakashi was even more surprised when he wasn't attacked. What, not going to attack me, Naruto? He asked, genuine curiosity lacing his tone. No, I'm not. Naruto acknowledged. I've been going through what I know about ninja teams. Kakashi's visible eyebrow was raised by this statement. You know, I have never heard of a 3-man team. It was always 3 genin 1 Jonin sensei, so this leads me to just one conclusion. This test is a sham. You weren't testing if we could get the bells, were you? Just if we could work together under pressure, right? Kakashi. Naruto fixed him with a look that held a little warmth in his eyes. Kakashi almost sighed in relief. That was the happiest he had seen Naruto all day. Kakashi smiled at Naruto. When did you figure it out? He asked, still smiling. Before noticing the predatory look on Naruto's face and realizing he had walked into some kind of trap. I didn't, at least until you confirmed it for me just then. Naruto said smugly. Kakashi couldn't believe it. He had just been outsmarted by a genin. Again, that was the irritating part. Shouldn't you go and look for Sasuke and Sakura then? Kakashi shot back at the blonde-haired genin. He was feeling mildly confused about why Naruto was still here now that he had figured out the things he needed to do to pass. Naruto shrugged before cracking his neck and drawing out Benihime again. I could, he admitted, but what would be the point? Mr. Emo is too proud and arrogant to accept help, let alone admit he needs it. As for Miss Pink-haired and fangirly, she won't help unless he does, so what's the point? Still, we have half an hour left. Naruto pointed to the clock, before smiling viciously. Care for a quick spar, sensei? Kakashi drew kunai in each hand. Well, you never know, they might surprise you. Kakashi said brightly. Naruto gave him a look that was the facial equivalent of, are you fucking serious? Kakashi sighed. Alright, he had to admit his blonde-haired student had a point. So what are the ground rules then? Kakashi asked, resigning himself to a 30-minute sparring session. Naruto tilted his head to the side, as if holding a conversation with someone that wasn't there. Kakashi pulled out a pair of kunai and settled them comfortably in a back-handed grip in each hand. Full contact, weapons and taijutsu only. Kakashi shrugged before charging his student. Naruto sighed and took a guarding position. Kakashi's first kunai went for his stomach while the other aimed at his throat. Naruto slashed downwards diagonally, forcing Kakashi to block of lose an arm, but the second kunai went on unimpeded. Naruto used the force of the slash to drive Benihime into the ground before using her as a pivot to kick the kunai out of Kakashi's hand, landing and letting out a viscous back-handed strike. Both teacher and student backed up to prepare for round 3. When the timer went off, causing them both to almost face fault. 10 minutes later found Sakura tied to a tree stump and none too happy about it. "Why am I tied to a tree?" she complained. "Why isn't Naruto baka?" She whined. Kakashi sighed. The test had been a goddamn nightmare. Minus Naruto, neither of the others were ready to be genin. Kakashi still couldn't believe it though. The dead last, or at least supposed dead last, had put up the best fight. "Because, Sakura," Kakashi said, sounding tired, "he actually put up a fight, unlike you." He ignored Sakura's protests that Naruto should be on the stump as he had no clan and was therefore inconsequential. In comparison to her, who was a clan heir. "Normally, I would fail you all on principle, but the council in all its wisdom has demanded that I pass Sasuke. Despite the fact he is both weak and unready." Kakashi took a brief moment of satisfaction of the look on Sakushi's face at the weak comment. He would help Obito's legacy get stronger, but he was not going to coddle him. A voice in his head asked about Minato's legacy, but he stomped it back down. "So by default I have to pass the rest of you." I smiled at them, though this time it felt like pure evil. "So get ready for hell, because I'm going to drag you up to Genin, Chunin, then Jonin level. If it kills me, or you for that matter." Team 7 as one felt a chill race up their spines that had nothing